my name is Nick Moir, and my day job is the vicar of St Andrew's Church in Chesterton, in North Cambridge, a parish which was once upon a time a village, and is now a large, well-inhabited part of suburbia, but with a bit of village character as well, with a socking great village church in the midst of it. I do some other things on the side of the diocese, but I think it's that you're more interested in terms of our theme today.
It is. So, I mean, let's say for the purposes of argument that this is an ordinary village in a city type of church. And as you know, Nick, the purpose of our discussion today is to talking about healing and whether the healing ministry has a role in a church like yours, whether you can talk about a healing church or a healing community, whether that's a thing that you just add on to ordinary church life, whether it's something special or central, and whether you can create that. So those are the sorts of things I wanted to talk about. So what's your sort of instant reaction to those?
Well, let me go back to the village thing first of all.
Yeah.
Because I was a village vicar, or two villages in Waterbeach and Lambridge before I came here. And we developed actually ecumenically with our other church colleagues a healing ministry in those villages, particularly with the Salvation Army and the Baptists. And we had some really, and that was healing in itself. Bringing us together in that we were in the business of healing. And I suppose one of the things that I kind of learned through that is that whatever the outcome, in some ways, the whole process of actually focusing on being a healing community and offering a healing ministry is in itself healing. It's because it's real. It's where people really are, and when you first do as we did then, had an ecumenical service of healing explicitly for healing, and that was quite interesting in itself because we had a combination of church traditions there, and they were, everybody was big-minded enough to actually think, well, we can have people with informal prayer and laying on of hands, but they wanted to have the pot of oil as well, and they wanted the vicar to stand there with a pot of oil and do this, and they loved that, and I remember actually that sheer experience of saying, well, because they all pointed to me and said, you're the vicar, that's your job. So I stood there with my pot of oil with this queue of Salvationists and Baptists and their friends, and everybody else in front of me, and a huge queue. I mean, that was my first experience of that invitation to come forward. It's a bit like a Billy Graham rally, because where these people are going to come from, they all sort of turn, form a queue, and you can see in their faces that this is a deeply meaningful thing, and actually just standing there and saying, and I thought, well, they're doing all the informal bits, so I'll play my game, I'll do what I'm supposed to do, and I just use the words from the book, look people in the eye or in the forehead, actually, whatever, and sign them with the sign of the cross, the words of anointing, and it was so powerful, and they all found it powerful, whether there's salvation, everything else, and I felt, to be honest, a bit of a cheat because I thought, well, I'm just standing there doing this, and of course I'm praying, and but the sort of deep gratitude, it made me thought, as though I'd sort of put sort of vast amount of labour and thought into this, and it was just me being there, praying, looking at people, smiling at people, anointing people, and just then coming to you, and then walking away with with that sense of kind of relief and having met with God. It's that sacramental thing, which is, and it was really healing to do that alongside friends, Baptist colleague and Salvation Army colleague, and all the rest of it. And we had that sense of we're about and also the fact, we would, as I hinted at earlier on, we were dealing with people in their real messy lives, which actually so often in church life we kind of bypass, and those of us who are pros in the pulpit, Alasdair, we do our,
whittle on.
our erudition about the Bible and about all of this kind of stuff. And every now and then we touch base with people's real lives, but this actually really does touch base with their real lives and their real concerns, and their real brokenness and their real angst and so on.
And so that experience was in a previous parish or previous two parishes. And so how did you approach your current church? Was there a healing ministry already there?
There was a healing, and there is a healing ministry. There's a team of people, a very varied team of people with very different kind of Christian backgrounds, and at least one or two who are sort of back row of the choir people who you wouldn't necessarily expect to have a sort of intensive healing ministry, but which I really liked. I mean, it's really refreshing, and it still is actually, Alasdair. I mean, and if anything, it's slightly broader. The team of people who are part of the healing team. But I've learned not to police it. I mean, safeguarding police it, yes, but not in terms of not everybody in it is the likely candidate that I'd have thought.
Yeah.
But they are people whom God has called to be part of this ministry.
Yeah.
And that's great. And that's part of it for me, is actually not controlling it.
Yeah.
Letting God do God's work. And particularly also letting, from a clergy point of view, letting lay people do God's work and not trying to take it over or to over control it. I mean, control it in the sense of oversee it, in the sense, as I said, in the safeguarding sense, and make sure that all of that stuff is crystal clear and so on, and that it's not abusive, and all of that. But
and how?
But I find that kind of liberating, and actually, they hadn't had sort of public healing services before. We introduced it into the main Sunday morning service once a term. We still do that. And, I can still remember the first time I stood there and I did the same thing. I thought, well, it worked in Waterbury, so I did the same thing here. I'll stand there with my pot of oil in the middle. And we had the healing team. The healing team went to the side or the back, I can't remember which, and did more personal prayer and hands and so on. And there was the same response of, this vast queue of people. And it was deeply moving, and still is deeply moving, and everybody was amazed in the first thing, because it was new. We don't do this sort of thing here, but not hostile. I mean, just and again, also those who engaged with it and stood in the queue were not all the likely candidates. I mean, people, all sorts of people who were there, and that's deeply moving in itself, because everybody has their needs, everybody has their hurts and the things that they're looking for healing for themselves and for loved ones, and it's not rocket science. It's just being there and offering, and actually the public offering of it is, in a way, in itself, an acknowledgement of all that hurt. And that people need that kind of acknowledging, and they need space to not dump it, but to bring it and to receive grace. And of course, every time we come to receive communion, and in other ways we have is a healing moment and all of that. But it just adds another dimension.
So I remember a few years back you said you wished or hoped that your church was a healing church.
Yeah.
You may not remember using that phrase, but it stuck with me. And I mean, the questions it raised in my mind was, well, what does that mean? Shouldn't every church be healing, or is this some special thing? Are there some specialist churches that are, not healing churches, but something different? So I don't know if you remember using that phrase and what you felt you meant by it. And
I don't remember using that phrase. What did I mean by it? I suppose I probably meant by it. You may have a better answer than I do that one, because you have a better memory. But perhaps what I meant by it is that we acknowledge that the church is about healing.
Yeah.
and that salvation, which of course, as has been said in, I've seen other examples of your interviews here, is that salvation in the Bible includes healing in terms of the word that's used, and but in people's minds, salvation is a religious thing and healing is a sort of human thing, and actually it's breaking down that barrier between the religious thing and the human thing, because the human thing is religious and the religious is human, and that's what our faith is about, really. So I think it's naming it. So if you name yourself, you say you're a healing church, or you're naming a dimension of your ministry which says this is what we're about, and hope that it's within our DNA.
And it's interesting that you've set up to have a healing service once a term, and I guess other churches may have this, a regular thing, because I suppose inherent in that is the expectation that people recurrently have hurts and bruises and cares and concerns, that you can't be erased once, that it just keeps coming back and back. Do you think that's a helpful kind of reminder, this public recognition that we keep getting hurt and bruised?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, it kind of raises questions about, of course, about does it do any good? I mean,
the efficacy.
I mean, it's the old thing about and about you have the person who's on your prayer list, and then not very long later they're on the RIP list, and and of course that's a question and an issue, but I mean, I do believe that I do believe in a God who sometimes intervenes and touches us and brings healing moments in that kind of way, but I'd still do it even if I didn't. Probably those involved in our healing ministry there who actually are not sure that God does that, but I'd still believe in it even if that wasn't the case, because healing is, well, looking at you, I mean, Alasdair, I mean, you're a medical doctor, and you'd be the first to admit, I suspect, that that sometimes healing in the medical profession is over medicalized and over scientized, if that's a word, whereas historically healing has been a much broader kind of concept, and what we're providing within our context, as within other contexts, is a kind of balancing act, if you like, to that. Is that healing is not just a matter of what you do to the doctor and what pills you get and what knife is put into which part of your body. It's another. There are other dimensions to healing to that, and that both are integrated with each other. And
I would take it a bit further. I mean, we're taught at medical school, and we're taught idealistically as qualified doctors to have holistic care and to care about the spiritual and emotional needs of our patients, but the reality often falls short of that. So I'm so grateful for churches and other worshipping communities for sort of picking those pieces up that we don't do, or either at all or don't do well. Can I ask you, I mean, I know, just picking up from what you said earlier, because there are some communities and churches that are frightened of taking on a formal healing ministry just because of the reason that you've said, that they worry about what happens if you pray for someone and nothing seems to work out, a sort of David Watson situation. Worry that would undermine the whole thing, or that you're setting up expectations that can't be met. So how often do you think it is that setting up a public active healing ministry raises those difficult questions?
Well, I think it's right to raise those difficult questions. I mean, I don't think there's any problem with raising those difficult questions. I was thinking about this the other day. One of the words for miracle in the Bible is wonder, isn't it? It could be translated as a kind of wonder. So a kind of miraculous event is something that evokes wonder. And as soon as you try and put that wonder in a box and try and explain it and everything else, you've actually reduced the wonder You see what I
Mm,
mean?
mm,
And so, you know, if you think you've got a slam dunk, proof of the miraculous healing and everything else, you've probably tried to put it in the box in that kind of way. The point of a wonder, I mean, there's two things about a wonder. One of it is it evokes that response. Wow, you know, we weren't expecting that, and isn't that wonderful? You know, so I've used the word, isn't that wonderful?
mm, mm,
And that's to me, that's what a wonder is about. And healing does involve wonder sometimes. But if you try and put the box around it and explain it too much, you then lose it. You
yeah,
can't box it up.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, there is the issue of kind of expectation. But I think we should just be more relaxed about that, and that, you know, our God is big enough to, you know, and you know, if wonderful things happen, that's wonderful. And we know that sometimes wonderful things happen, and sometimes it's just darn depressing and miserable and lamentable. I mean that literally.
yes,
And that's all part of the deal, isn't it? And that's
yes, yes. Well, we're learning about lament, aren't we, this year
yeah.
in particular? So, final question for you, Nick.
Can I ask myself a final question? I mean,
Yeah, you do that.
I just wanted to bring in the next. I don't know when this is going to go out, but you know, but of course, I said we have them every term. Actually, the COVID restrictions and everything else are really damaging to our healing ministry, because we can't, all the things, you know, that I've spoken about, anointing, about laying on of hands, all those things are not just incidentals. They're because of physical connection. And if you don't have the physical connection, something's missing. There's an agency of healing that's missing from your community. And the fact that we can't do that, we did have a healing. I think early on in the lockdown, I think we did have a healing service. I can't remember now. You know, where it was all kind of at a distance. But it's not the same. And we know, you know, just like we know that Zoom, what we're on at the moment, is not the same as having a face. It's great, you know, it's a great gift, and you know, thank God for it. When if we'd been out, we'd be a lot worse off. But it's not the same as the touch and the contact. And that's what, you know, there's a lot of healing that will be needed post-COVID, because you know, in the same way that people haven't been turning up to the cancer clinic and the, you know, to Adam Brooks and so on for the, it's the same thing, as it we're storing up for ourselves a load of, because, and hence it's kind of erupting in terms of mental health issues.
Yes.
What was your question? That was my question.
Well,
What was
that
yours?
was a good question. That was better than my question. We had an online healing service just this last Sunday, and I mean, it's better than nothing, but I think you know, you feel very acutely the importance of these basic things of, you know, being there, of touching, you know. I guess so. My final question, which is much less exciting, is, I mean, if you encountered a church, you know, if you visiting a church where there was no overt healing ministry in the church, would you always want to encourage the minister to do that? Do you think it should be a staple part of every church's life or every worshiping community's life?
Probably, yes. I mean, I would. I mean, I'm not a very prescriptive person, but yes, I think it's. I think without it, one's missing a dimension of our ministry and mission, and what we're there for. And why wouldn't you? Because as I said, I don't think it's rocket science. Doesn't necessarily require a great deal of effort. I mean, you just do it.
Well, that's a great place to end, Nick. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Thank you.